There are so many layers to creating our own reality, which is for everybody. Everybody can create their own. I want to make sure that that is stated first. Uh, I believe that this is why we come here as a co-creator to learn how to actually do that. I think before we're able to truly create our own reality consciously, we must understand ourselves at a subconscious level, because the subconscious is what's driving our reality. That's who we are for ourselves. As Joe Dispenza says, your personality becomes your personal reality. And it's unfolding for me deeper and deeper as I get to understand and know myself and dig within the confines and constraints that I've placed upon myself to learn and grow through. But personality in that concept of like creating your own personal reality is so much deeper than the surface level of personality. Oh, she's fun loving and she's really kind and stuff. And that's characteristics of the personality, which is a part of the egoic sense. But this is going really much deeper than that. So I want to get into, what our subconscious is and how it's driving literally everything in our lives. And then we're basically making up stories about why things are happening in our life instead of grasping that it's the things in your life aren't happening. They're just circumstances to allow you to see within yourself where you view yourself. Your subconscious is tied so deeply to your childhood, your memories. That's how it's programmed into you. It's the software, as Bruce Lipton says, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me, as you're saying that, I was thinking of like the famous Carl Jung quote, where it's like, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will rule our lives and we'll call it fate. Because we're all, like you mentioned, creating our own reality. We're all creating our own reality in each moment. It's just not, like most of us aren't doing it consciously. And I feel like the software, like the program that allows life to happen when we're not consciously creating our own reality is the subconscious. The way I see it, it's like this is a game, and we're all like taking part in this simulation or this like video game in order to learn and evolve as souls. And in order for it to work, there needs to be a program in place that runs automatically. And that's kind of what the subconscious is. And like you so beautifully pointed out, like it gets programmed. Like we obviously come in with certain there's constraints and there's different aspects of our personality that I think are probably already determined and programmed into that system. And then starting in utero and going through the first 7 to 14 years, depending on who you ask, we are automatically downloading programs from society, how to be like our parents, how to be like our teachers, how to be like our friends, how to fit in. And then also like reactions to all the traumas and experiences we've had. And these are so deeply ingrained in us that becomes what is generating the creation of our reality. And for the most part, most of us go through life not realizing it. Because like Bruce Lipton points out beautifully, it's like 95 to 97% of our thoughts and actions are all subconsciously driven by these programs. And then there's like 5 to 3% that is actual conscious awareness, where we are present for the thoughts and choosing and doing all the things that we convince ourselves we're doing all the time. But he uses the story of somebody who turns into their parents, and he'll have a friend who is slowly turning into his dad, and he'll react in the exact same way his dad would in a situation. And his friend who's known him for a long time will be like, "Oh, hey, you're acting just like your dad. And they're like, no, I'm not. And like, people don't realize it because we are completely oblivious to our patterns because it's what's happening when we're not paying attention. We can't see that part of ourselves. The conscious mind usually doesn't see the subconscious mind. They're running. It's like when we are thinking about something else, when we're daydreaming, when we're like distracted, this is the patterns that are running. It's who we're being in those moments when the pattern's running. But that's what's actually creating the situations in our life and the experiences that we have.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we get into just kind of our understanding of the subconscious and what it means for the both of us. If we just simply break down the word subconscious, sub is below. So it means below conscious, below consciousness,
Yes.
like you're saying, it's beneath it. It's not conscious. It's beneath that. It's, if we were to kind of like take a visual of like a house, it's the foundation. You don't see there, but it's beneath it.
Yeah,
like it's
what beneath the ground is holding up the house.
It's what's literally holding it up. And that's what the subconscious is. It's so ingrained within us. It is the software that makes us who we are. And what's really encouraging about that, though, once we understand this, and I think this is what was so exciting for me, even though it was equally as terrifying and like, you know, perspective and paradigm shattering, it's like, okay, if I absorbed basically this programming from such a young age, you know, when I think back to my years of 1, 2, 3, I mean, I barely have memories, but I don't remember learning how to walk. I don't remember learning certain things, but I know how to do them. Like I don't remember eating. That's subconscious. It's mirroring. You're watching the people that are closest to you. You're taking your first steps. You're doing it, and then your body is learning how to do it, and it becomes the software program that we're walking around talking, and then develop all of the things to say and not to say, and what's going to get us liked and not liked and loved and part of the tribe and not. I kind of went off on tangent.
Well, actually, I almost like jump in, like in the same way that we're learning how to walk and talk and do all these things, we're also learning how to handle stress and how to respond in certain situations and how we feel about strangers and money and work and enjoying ourselves and food and like all these deeply ingrained feelings and beliefs that we tend to take for granted and just assume they're true were ingrained in us and programmed into us through mirroring and kind of like osmosis, being around a family or being around whoever we're around in those young ages when, like you said, we don't really have conscious memories of it because the consciousness hasn't even really developed at that point. We don't have a sense of personhood or really a sense of, you know, being a separate being in the world at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you jumped in there, and let's build on that a little bit, because it truly is what makes up the foundation of who we are. Like if you're yelled at being too loud, or if you're yelled at for staying up later for your bedtime, if you're scolded at school, or the absolute opposite, if you're praised for being, you know, really smart or really pretty or really something good, or if you did something bad, all of these things leave an emotional imprint on us that construct the subconscious beliefs about ourselves as well as the world around us. The inner world is always going to shape the outer world, but it's kind of simultaneously, like if you believe that there are like stranger danger, I was taught, you know, I didn't like talking to people for a very long time. You know, I grew up in the 80s, as you did, where like that was like the height of all kids going missing, and you know, we were on the little kids on milk cartons and stuff, right? I mean, I want to also make known that like all of this, I believe, truly is designed for our evolution and elevation as a conscious human being. Like every person who ever told me I was wrong or great or anything, it all was working so perfectly for me to understand myself. Now, when I'm young, I don't get that. It was not until like a couple years ago that I realized, like, oh, wait a minute, I have all these subconscious programs. I'm pretty sure that's also part of the game. Now, as our generations are beginning to become more aware of this, I think there's much more conscious parenting in the fact that, like, okay, like there are certain energies and stuff that, you know, you want to have your birth at a completely, like, you know, meditative state and stuff. There's so much more research coming out, but that's truly because our consciousness is raising. And I don't think it would have happened if we didn't go through what we went through decades before. Everything has happened so perfectly. And we're designed in this way to come into this world, picking and choosing the communities, the families, the people who are going to be closest to us so that we can learn through these things. No circumstance is ever easy. I mean, I don't know anybody who's ever born into the perfect home. I mean, there's going to be people who are like financially well and things, but everybody has some sort of trauma, whether it be macro or micro, that's shaped their belief and who they believe themselves to be. And then they hold that narrative till they're 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on, until they recognize, until we realize that, wait a minute, circumstance just happened in my life and it has shaped my belief as an unconscious program that's been running for so long. And what the freaking cool part is, this is what I was getting at before, we get to change it.
Yes.
That's what it means by creating. It's like, okay, but we can't change it unless we're aware of it. That is the most revelatory thing I can really, like, I couldn't emphasize this enough. That when anybody is speaking to me, to us, like, especially if we're in conversations about wellness and bettering ourselves and spiritual growth and looking at any type of trauma or any type of incident that happens, especially what's going on in our lives. Oh, I had this thought, this is what's going on. Or I have this, you know, belief. That's conscious. When you've got the thought, it's conscious. The thought pops in your head, whether it be to wash the dishes or, oh, I'm a piece of crap. It's conscious. So it can't be subconscious because you're aware of it. What we need to do is backtrack and understand, where did that conscious thought come from? Because it's a cascade. It's almost like a pattern, a cyclical pattern. Like there's a subconscious thought or belief that drives a feeling first. It's typically a feeling first, then a conscious thought comes into our awareness. Yeah. We're aware of it.
Which is like almost instantly, right? Like we feel something and it's almost like the ego jumps in and narrates it to us and describes it and tells us why we're feeling this. But it's not necessarily true. In fact, it's usually not.
Yes, yes. And because it's the feelings that cause us to act as well. Because then the conscious thought is going to, again, create a feeling that causes an action, us to do something or not do something. That's the same thing. Inaction is just as important as action. Yep. And then a result. That last one is really, really important and like a really big piece of the puzzle, because the results are going to then stem back into the subconscious pattern, which comes again from that personality, that egoic nature. So it's really like a cyclical, that's what I mean. It's, you know, subconscious thought, then feeling, then the conscious thought, then a feeling, then the action, then a result. And it's this unbelievable mechanism for us to become aware. Yeah,
and kind of like I was saying before, like that, having that cycle is what perpetuates the game, because it's sort of like this so like subconscious thought, feeling or thought into feeling, into a story that causes an action, which causes a result. But then the subconscious mind is what we're using to filter that result and make sense of it. So that just when we're not aware of what's happening, the result just validates the belief that's already there and perpetuates it. So we have these like self-fulfilling prophecies and this perpetual loop of essentially going out into the world and seeking validation for all our self-limiting beliefs. And this is also why, like exactly what you were describing, is why so many people consciously choose to make changes in their life and then don't get the results that they wanted, because when they're conscious of it, they're great. Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, get in shape, I'm gonna eat healthy, I'm gonna meditate, I'm gonna go to bed early, I'm gonna do all these things, everything's great. But the moment they are distracted or thinking about something else, then that old pattern runs and something happens, and then the ego or they feel this subconscious thought, or they get this feeling, and then the ego jumps right in with like, it's never gonna work out. Like, you're a piece of crap. It's not worth it. Just eat it, whatever it is. And we get these stories, and then you do it, and then you get the result, and then from that result, we perpetuate the old story, and we kind of keep banging our head against the wall trying to create change.
Absolutely, and it's really important that I just want people to understand that all of this, like, there's so many layers to it. We're doing our very best to describe it. We can give some examples that at least will be tangible. When we're having these conscious thoughts, so if we're backtracking to the subconscious thought and the feeling, like all of this, even though we are talking about language, thoughts, and stuff, like the feeling aspect is just as important, because feelings have a frequency, and frequency is information. And even though that's like, we can't see it, I mean, you technically can't see words, or other than if they're like written down in a sentence, but us dialoguing right now, like, you can't see the words coming out of your face, but there's a resonance. We've talked about this in certain podcasts too, like the tone of a word or a sentence is very different than like it's free.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what words you're using if your tone is the opposite.
Like, yes, if I say to you, like, I hate you. Like, that's pretty powerful. I feel like I put a little bit of hate into that, but I was like, I hate you. Like, there's a fun loving, it's a different frequency, it's an energy. It's almost as though Peter Crone says it's like frequency precedes form. Everything really does that. That's energy, vibration, and frequency.
Yep.
That makes up the manifest world. So the reason why there's like that feeling before the conscious thought is that it's just there, and then we don't know that consciously because it's kind of tied to the subconscious during this cascade. That causes us to act a certain way. I think like maybe an example here would be good. Like, eating is a really good example of this, and I can use it for myself. Like, because I always never felt like good enough.
Can I jump in real quick before remember your example here about eating? But I want to say, like, when you said frequency precedes form, a really good tangible example of this for people to look at if they're not familiar with it is like cymatics.
Yes.
So you have like cymatics video where you have either sand on a plate, and it'll either be hooked up to like electrodes, or a lot of times someone will just run a violin bow on the metal plate, and the vibration of the vibration of a violin bow is creating sound. We know how that works. So it's creating sound through frequency by vibrating this plate, and based on the frequency that it's tuned at, or how they do it, where they rub it. I don't know exactly how you change frequencies, but it changes the shape of the sand. And the higher the frequency, the more like innate and beautiful these shapes become, and like they're like perfect symmetrical like designs. It's incredible. And then as the frequency changes, they scatter and reorganize themselves in different formations based on what the frequency is. And it's also done with water. We have water in like a petri dish, and running different sound waves through it changes the shape. And to the point where if you know what the right frequencies are, you can create images of like animals. I've seen one that's like a human face. You make them with like tortoise shells and different things. And it's so fascinating, and clearly like it's a tangible way of seeing that frequency and vibration and sound is what creates this reality of form. This like 3D game that we're in is created by sound and frequency. And that's the frequency, like you're saying, that comes with a certain feeling is literally changing the form of our body and our reality. And I think so. If people are interested in this, like, just go to YouTube and look up cymatics, and some of the videos are like incredible and fascinating. But you can go back to your example now. Thank you.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, the cymatics is very cool. I was gonna give the example of eating, because that's just, it's a coping mechanism. We all gather and garner coping mechanisms to kind of make us feel better for any type of inadequacy that, again, is subconscious. There's not one person on this planet that doesn't have some sort of coping mechanism. I'm gonna use the example of food because that was one of mine, but it can be anything from shopping to working too much to exercising too much to hard drugs to pornography to sex addiction to prescription drugs. I mean, anything and everything.
Even like simple things like gossip and complaining.
Yeah, yes, because it feeds you those stress hormones. It's giving you that familiar sense of a feeling. Everything is driven, again, subconsciously by feelings. So I had a narrative in my head that, like, there were so many narratives, so it's actually kind of hard to pick the exact one that was tied to food, but like that I was like inadequate and not worthy. That's also tied to like money and finances for me. So these are all very like I said, there's so many layers to them and everybody's going to be different, but like food was comforting for me. It was something that like wasn't going to leave me. It's not abandonment. It just made me feel better. So again, I was having all these subconscious thoughts that were below my conscious awareness. I didn't know that they were there. They were driving feelings of inadequacy and making me feel really uncomfortable about myself. The only way that I could get comfortable about myself once I started hearing conscious thoughts of like, you're not pretty enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not this, you're not that, everybody doesn't like you, everybody doesn't listen, these people abandon you, all these things, that drove an action. The action was eat. Just eat and eat and eat and eat. But hold on a minute. The result of that was, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get fat. And I gained a lot of weight from time to time, but because I was driven by the inadequacy of not feeling good enough, not feeling pretty enough, not feeling worthy enough, I developed an eating disorder. So the result I was getting was not, was literally in tandem, in conjunction with the subconscious thought. I honestly got over the eating disorder before having this revelation. Interestingly, just because I was doing so much other work, but that was like the cascade of this deep program within me that the only way that I knew how to make myself feel better was to eat. And then I would beat myself up over and over, as so many of us do when we have, a piece of pizza or fast food or something that wasn't in alignment with like a very holistic, natural view of life. It was, again, just perpetuating like, oh, well, I messed up again. Of course I'm bad. And I ate this that's wrong. And even after like the eating disorder, that was the same thing. And until I really realized like, oh my gosh, this entire time, the conscious thoughts that I'm having are being driven by something that's so much deeper than I could ever imagine. That's the root cause. That's what I think most people in the holistic wellness space kind of in general are talking. That's the root of it. Like, where did something happen really young in your childhood that made you believe you were unworthy of love, that you were inadequate, that you weren't good enough, that you were bad? I mean, I can picture and like go through all these scenarios, like all of us do. Like I said, we have the most we can have the most loving, caring caregivers and supporters and family members. It doesn't matter. It's not only coming from it, it's the world around us. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be said to us a lot of the times. I feel like half of the things that I learned and interpreted were from like magazines and TVs and just looking at people. I don't look like that. Yeah, it's like it's never conscious. It's just slowly being ingrained into the subconscious through repetition, right? That's how I feel like that's certainly how it's going with me. And I think it seems like a very common pattern that we all go through. I didn't mean to like cut you off there, but like I also, and I think we all struggle with self-worth. I'm pretty sure. I know that I did for a long time, and kind of the same thing. Like, and I think this is really interesting. Like, I tried for a very long time to change that. Yes. Consciously. Yes.
and wasn't able to do it, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how many affirmations I did, or meditations, or even like journaling about it. Like I wasn't able to change that until I was able to really change the way I relate to myself and to like perceive myself and reality. And I think that that's what's been really helpful for me, is to start to detach from my subconscious mind and my ego and be able to observe myself without judgment. And I think that that's really where you start to get into the area of change and transformation, not trying to change the ego from the ego, which is what I tried to do for so long in so many ways. And what I was saying before, like people decide they're going to make changes, and that's great. That's a really, really exciting thing. But they're basically just deciding that like I'm going to make my ego different. And you can't really do that. But I've been on this deep kick lately. In fact, I've talked about it for a while, but I'm like really like pulling back and viewing the body and the subconscious mind as almost like one thing, and recognizing that I'm not that has been really, really helpful to me. But you know that I'm more than that. I'm not just that. And I think there's something really interesting that happens when, like I'm saying, we try to start making changes from the ego level. The ego doesn't want to give up control. The ego is literally an idea. It's a story that only exists in our minds. So it knows in order for it to survive, we can't let go of that story. So the ego will do anything it can to perpetuate this cycle that we're talking about and keep using the results that we experience as validation for its own existence, to the point that the ego will choose to suffer the familiar rather than risk something that's more than that, or something different than that, because different might be us kind of transcending the ego and realizing the truth of who we are.
Yes, the ego must like almost prove itself right for us to keep believing this story that it's created.
Yeah, and it will kind of like, it will deny anything that it doesn't have control over, which is kind of like maybe weird wording, but I think the best way I can describe it is like when the ego recognizes that it is not the one that's controlling the subconscious mind, for example, it will convince us that it's not the subconscious mind running a pattern, it's us. And that we did it because we're bad. Because the ego would rather we believe that we're a failure, or that we're not worthy, or that we're not good enough, or whatever it is, than believe that there's a subconscious pattern that's creating a reality for us and that we can start to look into making changes. So for me, for sure, as I got to start to separate myself a little bit and recognize that I'm more than the ego, more than the subconscious mind, more than the body, I was able to look at the actions of my body with empathy, and look at, so like, say like an example is just anything, like, well, let's just say like I told myself I was gonna get up early and do something in the morning. And then my alarm goes off in the morning and I'm exhausted and I turn off my alarm and sleep for a little while longer. Then I wake up and I don't do the thing I said I was gonna do. I'm frustrated, and you start to beat up yourself. Oh, you're so lazy, you're so stupid, why would you do that? But what I really did was commit to something that was out of alignment with the needs of my body. So the lesson in there is, don't make commitments that are out of alignment with the needs of your body, Or give yourself more time to prepare. Make sure that you got to bed earlier and got things done the night before to make it easier in the morning to get up and do the thing. Set yourself up for success. There's no need to beat yourself up. The beating yourself up is so that your ego can keep you from recognizing that the commitment that you made was just out of alignment with the needs of your body.
Yeah, it's the reinforcement.
Yeah. So it's like in that moment, so maybe I was just like, I'm just gonna lay in bed for a couple minutes and then I fall asleep. Like the awareness that I am, the like eternal being that is perceiving the world as awareness from the perception of Dan, didn't fall asleep. I was aware of it. The body and subconscious patterning that we call Dan fell asleep because it was tired and it does its own thing. Why would I start to take ownership of not being good enough because the body was tired and went to sleep? Like it's
a great example.
Yeah, it's like these kinds of, I guess, like perspectives.
It is a perspective,
and starting to see the world in that sense. It's been so helpful for me to stop trying to take ownership of the guilt and blame and shame and like even hatred for myself, and just seeing things as much more neutral, and then allowing my consciousness to be informed by the lesson that I learned so that I'm able to do the thing the next time and to make better choices. There's a really interesting example that I kind of blew my mind thinking about recently that might really help drive home this idea of like the body being separate from my conscious awareness.
Okay, before you do that, because I just want to stay on this.
Yeah, of course.
I want to make sure that this is, don't forget your story. I want to, like, that was such a beautiful example about the alarming and how that's so relatable.
Mhm.
I've done that before. What I want to point out there, and also the example of the food. When I was talking, when how many people are talking, I'm going to eat something wrong, I'm a piece of crap, I'm beating myself up. It's just words. Like we're saying, it's just a story. It's simply a perspective. It is not true. It may feel real. It may feel real because the reality that you're living in, that the ego's created, i.e. these subconscious patterns that are going on, the ego's reinforcing it. Saying like, yeah, see, I told you, of course. But it's not true. What is true is always true. Is it true that you are lazy? Or anybody is lazy? Like, probably in the moment, the person who may be listening to this, who missed their alarm, may say yes. But that's not true. I guarantee you can find another time in your life that the alarm clock went off at really early in the morning, you needed to get something done, and you did it.
Right.
The ego also tricks you into believing that you've never been up early in your life, or the ego, makes me forget how many amazing health conscious food and choices that I make conscious over and over. It's just those one-offs of eating ice cream and pizza that's like, you are a piece of crap, look at you're throwing it all. No, that's not true. Continuously challenge the thoughts that come into your mind that are conscious. Continuously put a question mark after every word. Am I lazy? Am I unworthy? Am I unlovable? Am I not worthy of getting this raise? Or am I not worthy of getting this promotion and life is still happening? No. No. If you can't understand where your subconscious thoughts are coming from, you won't be able to direct your conscious actions to actually create the life that you want. It's literally, don't believe that you can't just, you must understand. We all must understand subconsciously what's dictating our conscious thoughts for us to be creators.
Yeah, I love that. I remember like always, like jump all over those words. I just said always. Jump all over those words like always, never, only. Like that's never true. Like I'm gonna use one again. I'm very aware of it, but like that's like such a great example.
I always do. I always fall. I always trip. No, you don't.
Yeah. I always trip. You've walked however many like thousands of miles in your life. I have no idea how many miles people walk in their life. but without tripping. How many steps have you taken without tripping? And then you trip once, it's like, I always trip. Or like, I always oversleep. You probably wake up on time way more often than you oversleep. And it's also like every single person who's alive has overslept at some point in their life. Every single person has been lazy at some point. They've tripped. Every single person has done stupid things all the time. It doesn't change who they are. That's just being human. That's their human body and subconscious mind going through life doing goofy things. It's a joke. It's hilarious. Like you trip. Like how many times have I like tripped and then like tried to pretend I didn't trip? Like who gives a shit? Who cares? People trip. But it's like, but we want to like judge ourselves for it. Like people are gonna think less of me if they know that I just tripped. So I'm gonna pretend I jogged 3 steps. Like they're not gonna think I'm an idiot who jogged 3 steps. Like that was cool. Like it's just, we play such crazy games with ourselves and like trying to make sense of this body because we can't control it.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's as simple, but paradoxically so complex. They're thoughts.
Yeah.
Everything is driven by thoughts. We can't stop thoughts. They're not problematic until we begin to believe them, especially the ones that are detrimental to the limitless, powerful, like majestic divine beings that we are. Anything that's put in that container of limitation, of unworthy, unlovable, whatever it may be, you're limiting yourself. It's because there is a subconscious belief that's allowing your reality to continue perpetuating in the way that it is. So when life is shitty, I hate to say it, but it is because there is a subconscious belief that things don't work out, or that this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to find the love of my life. I'm not going to find the job or the house or whatever it is, or I'm not good enough or whatever it is. But it's okay. Like I've been there, and I'm saying this with the utmost like compassion and sympathy. Like I have been brought to my knees and cried hysterically for day after day. Like this is not for the faint of heart. Like if you truly want to manifest or create your reality, we're manifesting 24/7. We're just manifesting from a place of subconscious programs and the beliefs about ourselves that life is this way because it's that way. Until you transform and change that belief, nothing outside of you will change. The outside world is just reflecting inside. And if we believe that things are happening outside of us and those are the circumstances and we cannot change them, you will not change them. That's the belief. If you believe you can or you can't, you're right, as Henry Ford says.
Yeah.
Okay, you can give your example.
Yes, thank you. No, that was great. But so one thing, like the breath is, I like talk all the time about breathing as being a bridge between the conscious and the subconscious, the spiritual and the physical. And it's because it's one of those things that your body does naturally all day long. You don't ever forget to breathe. You breathe while you're sleeping, you breathe when you're distracted, you breathe when you're doing things. And then we can also bring our attention to our breath. And we can consciously breathe and we can consciously manipulate our rate of breath. And that's why like it's a bridge. We can change it. When you change your breath rate, you change your brain waves, you change your frequency, you change your entire state of being. And it's an amazing tool that we can use.
Anybody, someone who's panicking is like, as opposed to someone who's in a meditative state or very calm and, taking, one big long inhale and exhale, there's a significant difference in how the physiology of your body changes with the breath. Yeah,
and there's this two-way street where it's like, when your mind is racing, your breath starts to race. When your breath is racing, your mind starts to race. And you can also do the opposite. When you slow down your breath, your mind slows down. When you slow your mind, you'll notice that you're breathing much more calm. Nobody's ever in like a really like zen, calm state with like a rapid breath. It doesn't happen. So it's this really, really cool bridge that we have. So because of that, I play around with breath work and breath holds and different things. And when you're doing breath work, like you can do a long breath hold, say. So you take a breath and you're holding your breath, or you exhale and you hold your breath with no air in your lungs and hold for as long as you can. And then eventually you get this like thirst to breathe. And it's like, okay, like there's a desire to take a breath, but I'm consciously choosing, no, I'm not going to, I'm gonna hold my breath. But we can't just hold our breath until we die. It's impossible. So I can't consciously choose to commit suicide by just holding my breath. Because the body will override it. The body will say like, nope, eventually you don't get to be in charge anymore. I'm taking over and I'm gonna breathe. And we'll do a really long breath hold, and then all of a sudden you release that breath and you maybe take a few like rapid breaths and like gasp for air a little bit. And then it just goes back to the regular cycle of breathing that you were doing before you consciously started to breathe. And I've done so much like breath work over the last like 10 years, and I've always thought it was me. You know what I mean?
Yes, you're blowing my mind.
Yeah.
You've never given me this example.
I know,
before.
this is a good one, right? So like for like 10 years, whatever, doing breath work and breath holds, and like even before that, like swimming in a pool when I was a kid, never did the thought occur like my body just took over, kicked me out of the driver's seat, and is now just gonna breathe on its own because it didn't trust me anymore to run the show. But that's exactly what happens. So when we're doing breath work, we can only hold our breath so long before the body kicks back in. It's like, you're not killing me. This is it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to run the show. I'm going to go back, and it goes right back. And very much in the sense that, like, if we look at it on a fractal perspective, like nature will, like when you can like build a building, and then if it's abandoned for long enough, nature will just take it back. Like vines grow in it, plants grow, and the glass shatters. Like eventually, buildings will like crumble, or you'll have like old stone structures that have been like taken back by nature, and you can almost like not tell there was something there. There's old like in the Amazon right now. There's like cities that used to have millions of people, and now they're just completely hidden with jungle because nature and life always comes back in and like takes over the things that we consciously try to do to it. And in the same sense, on like the micro level, when we try to manipulate our own breath, life will step in and be like, all right, you're doing it wrong. I'm gonna handle it now. And I think it's really, really cool. But this is also a really, really cool, tangible way to look at how like the body's doing its thing, and the body's going to make choices and do things that aren't in alignment with what I consciously would be choosing in the moment, but it's doing what it has to do based on how it's programmed to survive. And those programs, like we talked about before, also aren't always just based on nature. They're based on how we observed our mother or our father when we were a child, what we heard people saying, what we saw in magazines when we were a kid. These programs are there, and then that program is going to run. So in one sense, it's also really cool that this happens, and it's like this thing is perpetuating this pattern, this program we created is creating our reality now, and that we're the ones observing it. We also do have the ability to influence it and change those programs. And people talk all the time about like rewiring the subconscious mind. And although that is exactly what we need to do, most people go about it, like I said earlier, is the ego trying to change the ego and not actually touching these subconscious programs. So I think it'd be cool to lean into a little bit. Excuse me, bless you. To lean into a little bit, like how do we start to reprogram the subconscious mind? Because the subconscious mind, we've talked about it in a little bit of like a negative aspect today, but it is this incredible program that we have that works for us. And I love to use the analogy of like, if my conscious awareness is the captain of the ship, the subconscious mind is the crew. It's the ones that are doing all the things. When I decide where I want to go, it's the crew that goes and like moves the sails or does whatever needs to be done. It's the crew that does all the maintenance and cleans the boat and takes care of it. The captain is just like, we're gonna go here at this time, and the crew figures out a way to do it. And that's how our life goes when we are what's the best way to put this? Like when the subconscious mind is working for us.
Like a walk is a good example.
Yeah.
We go on a lot of walks. In
Yes.
the morning, like I'm going for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Really couldn't tell you how I walk, other
Yeah.
than like I move my legs.
Yes.
And sometimes that's the
Yeah.
subconscious.
So you set the intention of going for a walk, and then the body is like, yeah, I know how to walk. Let's go for a walk. That's great.
The example that I was saying, I don't remember learning how to walk as a child. I
Mhm.
observed it, like I was holding my mother's hand, I'm sure, but it just happened, and it's
Yeah.
a program. I know how to do it. Cooking is a good example too. Like I cook. I know a lot of other people
Mhm.
don't cook, but it's just like I don't know. I watched my grandmother. I looked at shows. I watched. I know when to stir. I know how to do this. I read recipes, and then when you do it over and over and over, my body just like knows. I don't even measure half the time
Mhm.
now. It just knows. It's
Yeah.
a perfect program.
Yeah, I think it's really, really cool. I'd like to come back to you said earlier, you had mentioned eating disorder and
Yeah.
those patterns.
Yeah.
And that you were able to change those patterns before you even realized kind of all this about the subconscious mind. So maybe if you're open to it, touching on how you did change some of that and change some of those patterns and change how you relate to yourself.
Well, at first, when I was consciously aware of myself having the eating disorder and not being healthy, I didn't realize that it was being driven by a subconscious program. So the example there is it was my ego changing my ego.
Yes.
So that's it. I knew that I was really, really sick, and I was only going to get sicker if I continued down this eating disorder path. So we did a lot of different stuff, diet and movement, workout wise. But what I was doing is basically replacing one addiction with the other. So I was binging and purging. That was the addiction of the eating disorder. And then just like so unbelievably strict with my diet and workout regimen that it became dogmatic. It worked for a bit. Like it was exciting because it was something new. And like my ego being changed by the ego was able to get results. And I felt so much better. And I pleased, like, this is, I think, how a lot of people, especially women who have the eating disorder, they are aware of this and they do adhere to strict diets and work. And it's good. It's better than binging and purging.
Yes,
please.
I want to say, like, especially in a situation like this where you're literally in danger and you're like endangering yourself, going about it in whatever means you have available. Like I recommend start doing that.
Yes,
and
anyone who's addicted to drugs or anything, like go to a treatment, like there. Yes. The help. I needed help. It was needed help. There's all these people. We must. Everything is a mirror, right?
Yeah.
I realized that later on, but we must enlist the help of others to truly reveal what's hidden within us. So I think that, I went from one addiction to the next. Again, it was a coping mechanism. I really didn't want to gain weight. There was a part of me that felt very unworthy and unlovable through, i.e. reasons of like abandonment with like my dad leaving us when I was really young. Like just like I was saying, watching and seeing like all of my friends being really skinny. Like I remember my cousins just being really skinny and looking so much different than I did. I garnered like self-value and self-worth by looking a certain way. And that definitely comes like with, like I said, magazines and TV shows and music videos. At that time, I just felt very overweight. But my coping mechanism to make myself feel better for the inadequacy of being unlovable and unworthy was to eat food. So it was this never-ending cycle. Until I discovered that and the subconscious belief. So I had like these conscious beliefs of inadequacy. Like I don't feel I'm worthy. I don't feel like I'm worthy of, love, or I'm worthy of status, or I'm worthy of money, or I'm worthy of anything really. It was causing me this pain. And the only way that I knew how to make myself feel better was by eating. And it wasn't necessarily, like I said, like I would eat normal food, but I would overeat. There was a scarcity also mentality, and like I was almost clinging on to things because I had like a fear of abandonment. And that it sounds weird to relate that to food, but that's what I did. It was like almost like I wanted to eat all of it so that I could overstuff myself so that I felt really like full, and that I wasn't gonna like lose something. I wasn't gonna lose that next bite.
I think I've never asked you this, but I never really like put those things together. Like the abandonment with food, do you feel like it was you were relating to yourself and abandoning yourself when you wouldn't give yourself the foods you wanted, like when you couldn't just eat like cake and candy. That's an abandonment. So you knew, like, if I'm having dessert, I'm gonna eat all the dessert because I don't know when, like,
The next time
I'm gonna take this away from myself and abandon myself when I want something in the future and I won't be able to have it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Because as I was starting to become conscious of my thoughts, I think most people aren't even conscious of their thoughts
For sure,
or
yeah.
thinking. I didn't even know that there were conscious thoughts versus subconscious thoughts probably until about like 5 years ago. So when I began uncovering, okay, these conscious thoughts that are arising that I am aware of are being driven by these subconscious programs and these inadequacies. Like I said, no one ever told me that I was unlovable or that I was going to be abandoned. I just felt that way because I observed what had happened to my family. And so I felt like I did something wrong, that I wasn't good enough. And so the thing that made me feel better. And so wait, what did you ask me? Oh, the abandonment,
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
So once I began understanding that as a theme, when I started really tuning into myself and my higher self and the wisdom within, like I've talked about this on the podcast too, like I'll get like one-liners, like profound insights for myself. And I was journaling one day about this, and I got like, you feel abandoned because you abandoned yourself. No one abandons us. We abandon ourselves. I took responsibility. Like this is another thing that's very important. We really haven't talked about. Like we must become accountable and responsible for that which we're oblivious to. Like, we can't, there's only so much we can play the victim and woe is me. Oh, everything happened this because life is happening. And but it's happening for you. It's happening for me to discover who I truly am, that I can't ever be abandoned. And that was such a lie. It literally, going back, it's like, wait a minute. I thought for the longest time I felt abandoned because my dad left. He didn't actually leave. Like he just my parents got divorced. Like he's been in my life for 37 years. All of my friends that like abandoned me at different times for fights and stuff that we had that perpetuated that's the ego, right? Like I can name really a lot of people who like didn't speak to me for a while, even like family members, for little fights and stuff. It was recreating that narrative of, oh, like you have to act a certain way or they're going to abandon you. You're not lovable, see? But as I'm actually decoding this and now conscious of that subconscious thought, I'm able to challenge it. Every single person in my life who didn't speak to me for maybe a week, a month, or a year is still in my life. I've actually never lost anyone or anything. The ego only points out the times that they didn't speak to me, yet they've all been in my life for decades and are such important. And it's kind of funny.
It is.
It's like, wait, this isn't true. It felt real though. That's what I want to make sure that it's real, and it's real in the moment, but it's not true because what is true is always true. So it was a long period of time that I discovered this as a means to cope, that okay, I used food in this way, and I used to do that just to make me feel better. I don't need to do that anymore. I have so much reverence and respect for those versions of me that only knew how to cope that way. So that's why I say I have so much sympathy and compassion for people who do hard drugs, who are addicted to certain substances, who are addicted to working or shopping or can't be with themselves or can't, think they can't find love and go from relationship to relationship or whatever that is. It's like it's happening for you, but recognize the pattern. But no one can do that other than yourself. Like I said, the help is necessary, I believe, because we need to have reflection and feedback from our people. But even without, like, I didn't do any of this with a therapist. Like I'm reading and realizing that the world is going to provide me with the necessary means to uncover this. I just have to be willing to see it. Most people are so oblivious because it's hidden. It's beneath, it's in a shadow, it's so tucked down into who we believe ourselves to be that we don't question it. Did that answer
No, that
your
is,
question?
I think that's great, and that's why I almost was like jumping off point from there, but I thought it's such a great example because you did start with almost like the ego changing the ego, but then over the long haul, you started to get deeper answers, and that's really what I want to get at. Is like, because I think my opinion, like I think like affirmations can be really helpful, and meditation can be really helpful, and all these things can be really helpful, but you have to ask the hard questions, which are literally like how and why and really question mark, like is that really true? But like asking that, and that's what I was assuming you did, because I know you pretty well, is started to question all of your beliefs and all of your actions and question why you do the things you do and why you believe the things you do.
Yes, and one part that I want to just touch upon is the ego trying to change it. I think that's a necessary step. I think most people do
Of
that.
course, yeah.
It's kind of it's the dissolution process. It's shining a light on the ego that doesn't necessarily want to be seen. I think what made me really grasp and realize that like, oh wait a minute, this isn't working, is because I still didn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I still felt inadequate. I still felt unlovable.
You hadn't got to the root at all.
Exactly. I lost so much weight. Like I said, I was in the best shape ever. Like my muscles, I had a six pack. All this stuff, but I still didn't feel good. So then it makes you think, like, wait a minute. I'm doing everything that I thought I quote unquote should be doing to garner like love and acceptance and worthiness from other people. But it's like, no, I still don't feel good, and I'm still binging, just not purging. It's still, so again, like life's revealing things to you, and the way that you feel about yourself is the way that you're going to feel and show up in the world, and you're going to keep picking different mechanisms, coping mechanisms that make you feel better until you realize that, hold on, something else is driving this much deeper, and until that's revealed and uncovered, not going to, there's only so much food I can eat. There's only so much shoes I can buy. There's only so much money I can have. There's only so much like likes on Instagram or followers I can have, until the truth of like the perfect being that I am was always that way. My worth has always been intact. Our worth as humans is intact, always. The only thing that changes is the circumstance that changed our perspective of that. And that typically happens throughout our entire life. And that's going to continuously happen. I think that that's also part of the game. Life wants to experience itself through the individual dance, through the individual beliefs, and it wants to make sure that we know who we truly are. And I've been challenged very, like, do you think you're worthy of this? And it's like, yeah, I do now. I would have said no to you, but yes, I do. And then the universe is presented. Okay, great, you do feel worthy. I'm going to give you something else. And then they'll throw a boat, and then something else will come and be like, oh, wait a minute. And it's just the constant. It's constantly reverting back to that deep inner knowing of that I am perfect. I am worthy. I am lovable. I am. Like it's that perfect awareness of being, that nothing else can distort that other than the perception of the ego that is based in belief, which is words. And if I created that, I can change it. But I must become aware of the subconscious programs that's running that narrative before I can do anything then that's in the realm of action. Action comes later, right? That's the ego trying to, you're too far down the cascade. I think that's why I realized that therapy didn't work for me. The therapists are trying to change something without understanding the subconscious program, because I don't understand the subconscious program. So they're telling me to do this and do this and do this. Not that those things can't be helpful, but we got to figure out what I've got to figure out what the subconscious patterns are, the software that's been driving me to feel certain ways that again drive me to act and then receive the results that I'm getting in my life.
Yeah.